This week on the LightWave Paperback Podcast, 1Q84, a novel written by Japanese author Haruki Murakami, published in 2009 and 2010. The novel is set in Tokyo in the year 1984 and explores a parallel world referred to as 1Q84. The title is a play on George Orwell's 1984, and the Q in 1Q84 stands for a question. The story revolves around two main characters, Amame and Tango, whose lives become entwined as they navigate this alternate reality. Amame is an assassin for a mysterious organization, and Tango is an aspiring writer. As the narrative unfolds, strange and surreal events occur, blurring the lines between reality and fantasy. The novel touches on themes such as love, identity, cults, and the nature of reality. Murakami's trademark style is evident in the narrative, with a mix of magical realism, intricate storytelling, and deep philosophical explorations. 1Q84 has received acclaim for its imaginative storytelling, intricate plot, and thought-provoking themes. If you enjoy the literary works that blend elements of fantasy and reality while delving into the profound philosophical questions, 1Q84 might be a captivating read for you. Thank you for clicking and downloading. We do appreciate your time. I'm here with my producer. So yeah, thanks for joining us this week. So this week we are talking about 1Q84, which is a book that, from memory was published in 2012, but it was published in the United States then as one book, because it was translated from a book that came out late 2009 and then early 2010, because it was split into 3 books. So this book is very long because it is consistent of 3 different books, and those 3 books are of all average length. So you could assume that your reading time is going to take about 3 times whatever your reading time is for a book. So for me, that was about 2.5 weeks. So it took me about 2.5 weeks to read this book, and that feels normal. So it didn't feel like this burden that sometimes long novels feel like to me. So I hate to bring it up, but Lord of the Rings is a very long book that also consists of 3 books, which is also published as one book. Lord of the Rings takes forever to read. It's very slow. It's very intricate. There's 20 pages describing a campsite. There's another 20 describing the trees. It can feel very, very slow at times, right? Now, there's a lot more richness in a text like that, and Lord of the Rings went off to spawn an entire genre, so credit where credit's due. But this, even though this is 1100 pages long, it doesn't really feel like that. It just feels like it's 3 books kind of glued together. It doesn't feel that bad. So if it takes you a day and a half to read a book, then you just times that by 3. Whatever your normal reading length is for a modern novel, that's what this is going to take. So it's not going to feel overly burdensome to take on this book in any way. But that being said, this book is very strange, and I'm not going to get into too many spoilers. I'm not going to try to spoil the book, but of course I'm going to talk about characters. Of course I'm going to talk about events that happen with the characters, and maybe I'll even talk a little bit about some of the twist and questions that go into this book. So if that's not something you're interested in, if you want to read it and then come back to it, that's fine. Or maybe never come back to it. That would also be fine with me too. So so the book 1 at least is split up. It goes back and forth between the 2 characters. So you have the main character Tango, and then you have the main character Amame, and it goes back and forth into their perspectives. And at first it seems like it's never going to connect, but you could assume eventually these characters are going to meet and that kind of thing. But the first book is just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay. Tango is a kind of, how do I describe Tango? So, well, the book continuously describes him as a man that works at a cram school. He is a math teacher. He works about 3 days a week, and then the rest of the time he just kind of spends reading and writing his own work. So he is a math teacher at this cram school, which I don't know. I might compare it to like a community college, or here in the city I live in, we have some, you could think of like standardized testing, like places that help you with standardized testing or that kind of thing. But he seems to teach classes. So I think the easiest comparison I can make is something like a community college. But this is in the 80s of Tokyo, so it's going to be a little different than now in the Midwest where I'm at. But that's the idea. So that's what Tango is doing. And like I say, he works 3 days a week, and the rest of the time is just kind of spent reading his books, and just kind of living alone. He lives a very solitary life. He enjoys that. He lives a very simple life, and he keeps it that way on purpose, it would appear. And Amame is the exact opposite. Amame is an assassin, and will go on a very adventurous, spectacular. She goes and assassinates men. Is what she does. She assassinates men that are abusers of women, and she does it meticulously. And then also on top of that, she's not just an assassin, but she's also an instructor at a sports facility, and she knows all about the human body, and she is just, everything is physical. So she's designed her body, her health, everything is on purpose. She's absolutely meticulous about her fat content, everything she eats. She has a purpose. Everything has a purpose, and she's very meticulous in this way. So everything with Amame is physical, and everything with Tango is in the mind. It's intellectual, right? He teaches math, and what does he do on this off time? He reads and he writes fiction stories, and that's where we pick off. So those are the two characters, and they're opposites, but they're kind of the same, and that's, this isn't the first book to come up with that idea, but that's the idea. So they're opposites, but they're also very similar. And as the story goes on, you find that they have more and more in common in their own ways. And it's almost like reading two books at the same time, because there's no real intersection between them, and they're just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay, so you learn more about their past, you learn more about their motivations to what they're doing, but one thing that happens is that Tango is tasked from his agent for his writing to rewrite a novel. Okay, so they have been there's been a submission from a 17-year-old girl who submitted a writing sample, maybe a full story, that is very, very bizarre. It's unlike anything they've ever read before, but it has a lot of technical problems. So it's certainly written by someone that doesn't have a background in writing, but the story in itself of the 17-year-old girl that's written is so interesting that they want to rewrite it. They want Tango to rewrite it because he has such technical abilities, and then they're going to pass it off that the 17-year-old girl wrote this original work. Okay, so that's the idea. And through reading that story and Tango working on this story, Tango finds that there is a lot of just something special about this story, even though it has grammatical problems, it has technical problems. Certain things are just left out. It doesn't make sense. So he meets with the 17-year-old girl to try to figure out, how am I going to rewrite this for you? And she barely has anything to say. And it turns out that she didn't technically write it out herself. She dictated it to someone that she lives with, a girl, and it turns out that the 17-year-old girl is an orphan that lives with a teacher. And it just, the more he digs in, the more he finds out, the worse it gets. And that's the issue. So he does rewrite the book, and then they do end up publishing it. And then when they publish it, it turns out that there's things in that story that may or may not have gotten out, and it causes problems with what turns out to be a cult. And it turns out that the girl had escaped a cult, and there is certain fantastical elements that are in that story that turn out to be true, but they thought it was just a work of fiction. So that's Tango, and that's how he gets involved. And Amame is an assassin that works with a secret organization, and they are interested in murdering men, assassinating men that are abusive to women or girls. So that's what they do. And it's a very spy oriented story. They have these missions, and how are they going to plan for it? How are they going to do this? And as I say, Amame knows everything about the human body, and so she studied the human body, and so she has a lot of different ways that she can murder someone where it wouldn't be suspected that it was even a murder in the first place. And one of those is a needle prick in the back of the head. So this is one of her techniques, and she uses needles that are so small that it doesn't leave behind blood, and it just is assumed that these men died of natural causes. And so that's one of their methods of doing it. Later in the book, and as you read this, you're going to start, as you get into book 3, you're going to start questioning what on earth is even real at this point. Who's real? What is a real character? What's even going on? I mean, you're not lost, but you will start questioning what is real. Who's in the real world at this point? And one of the characters said, well, in the real world, if you prick somebody, it bleeds, right? That's, if you cut me, I'll bleed. That kind of cliche saying, that's it. And we know from book 1 that Amame can kill somebody and there's no blood. She has a technique, so it makes you question all the way back to book 1. Okay, was that real? Well, you don't know, because the definition in the book that something's real is if you prick me, I'll bleed. And we know from book 1, almost like within the first quarter of the book, that she can kill somebody with a needle and they don't bleed. Okay, so it'll make you question everything. Everything is questioned, and that's where the existential part of this book comes in, is the characters start to wonder, why am I doing this? What is the point of what I'm doing? Why am I doing this? What is the point of what others are doing? So Amame has friends. They go out. They have a good time. They have normal, rowdy, exciting, they go to bars, they drink, they party, they have fun, right? Well, after those wild times, waking up with a hangover, wondering, why am I doing this? I'm going, back and forth between these wild nights, and then I'm going with, murdering people, and then, what is the end game here? What is this question? And Tango kind of has these questions too of why am I'm teaching at this school, I'm rewriting this, I'm getting myself involved, and then more and more he gets himself more and more involved with this 17-year-old. And this involvement with the 17-year-old is really where the criticism of this book comes in. So if you've ever heard of the criticism about this book, this is probably what you heard. So his relationship between that 17-year-old and the way it's presented is inappropriate. So it's my opinion that this is an inappropriate relationship, and I think if you read it, you'll probably agree. It is off-putting. It's off-putting, this relationship between Tango and the 17-year-old girl, Foray. So what can I say? That's the issue with reading, right? When you read something, you are in someone else's consciousness, all right? It is one of the few acts where you actually take your thoughts and you're replacing it with somebody else's thought. Well, these thoughts are a fictional character named Tango, who's 30 years old. Now, I could really relate to Tango. I myself am a math teacher. I'm older than Tango at this point, but I'm almost 40 and he's 30. But I can relate to what, I've been in this spot. I know what he's thinking. I know how he's feeling. So I can relate to him. But his relationship, the way he views this 17-year-old girl, is just frankly inappropriate, even though he keeps saying it's not inappropriate. And even though he keeps saying he doesn't find her attractive and he doesn't want a relationship with her, the more he says it, the more you question, is he just in denial? Is he just saying he doesn't find her attractive, but he really does? And then he clearly does. So he does objectify her. And yeah, their relationship is 100% completely inappropriate. It's inappropriate. But what can I say? Does that mean that the character shouldn't think that Murakami shouldn't write this? I don't know, but I can say that it's inappropriate for sure. Okay, so that also brings up how the book identifies women. And it certainly identifies them as sexual objects. So that is something that's very difficult in this book. No one's perfect, and when you read an author, guess what? It's going to come with everything that author thinks about. And this author is just kind of writing what they want to read, right? So you're dealing with that, and this was written by a man that was born in the 50s, so you're gonna get some of that. If you're reading the Stephen King, you're gonna get some more of it. Okay, so that's it's not anything that's not in Stephen King. So, and he's quite popular. So I don't think it's it's not necessarily a cultural thing here. It's a thing with male writers. So if you read a book with a male author and they're heterosexual and they're born in the 50s and they write a bunch of books, it seems like it's going to come up. So it comes up in this book, and it's quite uncomfortable. It's quite uncomfortable to even talk about here. But that's the issue. So anyway, he does get involved with this 17-year-old girl, and they end up living together, and they kind of have a relationship, and it's quite awkward. But what can I say? That's not, as it turns out, the main story of the book. Okay, so it does move on from there, and that's good. Okay, but I could see a few people just throwing the book at the door and never picking it up again. And it seems like if you look at the online reviews, a lot of people get there and that's it. If you keep going, it does go somewhere. I'll try not to spoil it too much, but all I can say is if you get to that point where they have the relationship, keep going. It does resolve, and there is a payoff to that. So at least there is a point to it, I think, in some kind. As I say, the book really will make you question, like, what character is real, what's going on, am I getting correct information, what's happening, and it gets kind of creepy, it gets kind of spooky in points, certainly when Tango visits his father, in what he calls the Cat Town, which is a reference to a novel he was reading at the time. It gets pretty spooky, and I read some passages to my wife when he was at the sanitarium with his father, who was in a coma. It was creepy. I was like, you gotta hear this. And so I read it to her, and she's like, oh my God, this is crazy. And it is pretty crazy. So, it's really interesting. And the things that Murakami does with Tango's father, that relationship, the father-son relationship. Tango has a lot of resentment towards his father because his father would drag him around for his work. Tango's father was an NHK subscription fee collector. So apparently, I don't know this for a fact, I only know this from the book, what I would think of as like PBS or NPR or something, apparently is not just taken out of the taxes, but is actually a subscription fee that needs to be collected. So imagine that, your local radio station and your local TV provider that you may or may not have where you're at this point, but at the time, they would collect money. It's not free. Everyone gets it through the airwaves, but then they collect the fee separately. So that's what Tango's father did, and it is quite a confrontational act because not everyone wants to pay, or some people say, well, I already paid, and this. So it's a very confrontational type of thing, and because of that, Tango's father feels that he has better luck when he drags along young Tango, and Tango feels very uncomfortable with this, seeing his father, get in these confrontations, yell at people, demand the subscription fee money. It's embarrassing, and it's tiring, it's exhausting, and it's not fun, and it's not what Tango wants to do after school or on his weekends. And on the other side of the coin, Amame's family is part of, they call it Witness. I'm pretty sure it's Jehovah's Witness. I don't think I'm making that up. I believe it's Jehovah's Witness. So they're doing something similar where they're handing out pamphlets. They're talking to people. They're trying to get other people involved in, in Jehovah's Witness. So if you've ever been around Jehovah's Witnesses, you know that they love to hand out pamphlets. And I've had many come to my house and hand me pamphlets. So that's similar. It's similar, right? They're both being dragged along. And there's also this scene in their childhood where they see each other, both being dragged along, and they have this kind of silent moment where they make eye contact and, just kind of like, yeah, I know how that is, So they have this connection as a childhood, and then it turns out that, they still remember each other from childhood. They went to school together, and this is how it's leading up to eventually they're going to meet. But as I say, Murakami, his work on that father-son relationship, I think really shines in the book. I think that was one of the highlights for me. I mean, it's really sad and terrible, but after reading the book, I think it was one of my favorite things with what he did, and I don't want to spoil it just in case somebody out there would listen to this and then want to read that book. But it was one of my favorite things and what they did, and I'll say not too much, but a little bit more, and that is this idea of your job defining you, and who the existential question is, who are you? Who am I? What is this? And one of those answers is, well, you work at a cram school. You're a math teacher at a cram school, or you work at this place, right? This is your job. You're an NHK subscription fee collector. That's who you are. Well, your job is part of who you are. So in this book, and of course in our real lives, how you answer that question can sometimes just be with what job you have, and that's who you are. So that's really kind of laid on. I don't want to laid on thick. It's kind of a phrase that has a negative connotation. I guess I want to say, it's just played with, and that's definitely in the third book that comes up more as things are getting wrapped up, is who are you? Well, one of the things is your job. Well, does it have to be? Are you outside of your job? Are you still you if you change jobs? That kind of thing. So that's it. And going back to the beginning, Tango always seems to make these choices where he's not going to become a workaholic. So it's not until the third book that you see in the first book that Tango's really taken a cue from his father. His father was his job. That's what he was. He was his job. He took his job very serious. His job was everything. That's who he was. It was his duty to complete his job. Tango isn't that way. When he's not at work, he doesn't think about work. When he only works 3 days a week, and then he lives a very simple life, very inexpensive. He buys used books. He doesn't own a TV. He cooks very simple meals. He doesn't go out to eat. He just lives a very simple life, so his job doesn't become who he is. And I don't think he ever says it, but we can say with some certainty that would be taken from his father, that he doesn't want to become his father. And then through the book, he kind of understands where his father was coming from a little bit. Okay. So that is great. And I would say in the end, Amame also has somewhat of that realization that not only is she not who she was, but she can become whoever she chooses to be. So that's part of what the book is about. But highly suggest the book, even though it's terribly long. It's 1,100 pages, 3 books. It's pretty long, but it really is great. And the characters are vivid. They feel real. When they do something, you feel it. When they feel something, you feel it. They express it. The writing is very clear. Again, this was translated from Japanese to English, though Murakami obviously understands English. From my research online, it appeared that Murakami has actually translated English books into Japanese. So I believe he does have an understanding of English. There's many parts of the book that feel American, that do not feel Japanese. Almost all of the music references are Western for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. When I researched that, because I thought that was odd, that all of the music, there's a lot of music references, certainly in book 1, and all of them are Western. Most of them are classical or jazz, but all of them Western. And I thought that was kind of strange. Didn't know if that was a translator's choice, like, oh, well, we're going to try to sell this in the States, so we got to change all the music references. But it doesn't appear. It seems that that is what Murakami preferred to write about in this book, or prefers to write about. And this is the only Murakami book, or this is the first one I've ever read. So it does appear that he does write about music quite a bit, and that he owned a jazz club in his 30s, it sounds like, from my reading online. So it sounds like he is quite familiar with Western music, and maybe that's predominantly what he listens to. So when he writes about it, that's quite natural for him. But I didn't know if that was part of the story, I didn't know. So I didn't know if that was on purpose or that was a translation, because I know, with Harry Potter or whatever, they would translate certain references to American reference. That's why there's 2 versions of Harry Potter, the United States, and then of course the British version. they would change some references just to make sure that, Americans were able to read the sentences the same. And then there is many references to other novels and books, and I'm not sure if all of them are actual real books, but some of the real books that are referenced, of course, 1984 by George Orwell is referenced many times. And I will say, from my reading, it's referenced, but it's not overly used, and I appreciate this. Since this book is called 1Q84, which is a reference to the year 1984, and they are playing on this idea of 1984 and a direct reference to the Orwell book, which is overly referenced by far, maybe more than any other science fiction book of the 20th century. It is often misunderstood and referenced. I think Murakami did a wonderful job of referencing this. And, I've read 1984, but it's been a while. And we all already know what it's about. But one thing I can say about this book is that it isn't necessarily an overreaching government, but there is a lot of, one of them is an assassin. There is a lot of spying going on, but it seems to be the people are doing it and not necessarily the overarching government. I don't get this big sense of government is around. There are police around, but they're not part of the main story. It's really the characters that are spying on each other or trying to get information. So that is different. That is a different feeling than you would get from Orwell. So maybe that's something that Murakami is talking about, because anytime we have a science fiction book, what is the author saying? Why are they saying this, right? In the golden age of science fiction, they're talking about spaceships and these blonde-haired, blue-eyed men that are basically cowboys in spaceships. And what are they doing, right? So you're looking to this future. That's where that was coming from. And of course, it looks ridiculous now because it is ridiculous, but that's where they were coming from. Now, why is Murakami looking back? Not looking to the future, but looking back. So he's writing this in the late, 2000s, right? We'll say 2007, 8. He's thinking about this. He's writing about this. Why is he looking back to 1984? Is it just because George Orwell wrote about 1984? George Orwell was looking into the future and, worried about governments and in response to his times in the 40s. So why is Murakami looking back? Well, is 1984 the 1984 that George Orwell predicted? No, it doesn't seem that's the case. It seems like we didn't get this overarching government, but we seem to be spying on each other. Maybe that's what he's saying. I don't know. But in the book, that's certainly the case. There's no wiretapping. Most people that we come in contact with the book have very little interest in television. They have very little interest in any media other than reading and FM classical music and maybe some records. So there isn't this oppressive feeling of ads and government, and it's just not there. But what is there is people choosing to spy on other people for information. So maybe we become Big Brother in a little way, all right? And that's something that's played with in the book, that it's not this big monster that you have to deal with. It's these itty bitty ones, right? Itty bitty ones. So that's interesting too. There is a lot of references to making dinner. I'm not sure why. Maybe Murakami is a bit of a chef or home cook himself, but there is many detailed informations of what these people are eating on a daily basis. You will almost get some recipes out of this book. I'm not sure why, but if you want a healthy breakfast, this might be a good book for you. You could have a slice of toast with butter and a cup of coffee in it while you boil an egg. So there's a lot of information about simple meals. I don't know why. If you wanted to do a second pass and maybe shorten this book up a little bit, maybe lighten up on the meals. I don't know. We almost know everyone, what time they sleep and what time they wake up. We know what they eat, and is that because we're spying on them? Gosh, I don't know. But, it's a great book. Vivid characters, vivid world. Did it feel Japanese? Not necessarily. I feel like of course, the references, the things they eat are very Japanese, and some of the relationships are Japanese, but I had no trouble whatsoever of identifying with any of the characters with, my everyday life and my relationships. So I don't think a reader would have any trouble identifying with these characters, at least from some cultural reference. So I highly suggest it. I say check it out, and if you do, let me know. And hey, thanks for listening. Hey, if you like the podcast and you're thinking about getting a new phone, I would just like to point you towards the affiliate link in the description. There is a link that will set you up with the Light Phone website, and I use a Light Phone. I really love it. So if you're thinking about getting a new phone, and maybe you're thinking about getting away from the iPhone, if that's something you're interested in and moving towards a dumb phone, I can't suggest it high enough. It's my main phone. It's what I use every day. And if you use that affiliate link, I get a little on the top. Okay, so I get about a few dollars off of your purchase. So take a look at that, and if you're interested, use that affiliate link. All right, thanks.
Daddy, I'm done with this game.